Hey, what's up guys, this is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are taking a look at the new Mafex Wolverine. Now, if you guys remember, the blue and yellow version, the air quote tiger stripe version of Wolverine that came from Mafex, left a lot to be desired. It fell apart, the claws were weird, the paint was weird, a lot of QC issues, left a lot of people pretty unhappy. This is their second attempt at the character. I'm happy to say a lot of those things are improved, but of course it is a different design, so some of those things don't even exist on this one, so that's a good thing. It depends if you want a blue or a brown Wolverine. This one's brown, obviously. If you like that, you're going to be pretty happy. This is a much stronger release. There are a few things, though, that we definitely need to talk about that may sour the taste just a little bit, but we'll see. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands to the top of his head about 5 7/8, to the top of the ears about 6 1/8 inches tall, which makes him pretty much, let's say 15 centimeters and 15.5, right around there. And just so that you can see how he scales compared to Marvel Legends, here we have the Marvel Legends and here we have the Mafex. It's pretty darn close. It'll be close enough for those of you that want to intermix them. Speaking of Marvel Legends, a lot of you have been asking me for a while now, since I first talked about these heads a long time ago, am I ever going to sell those new Logan heads that I made? And yes, I will. It'll be at the beginning of next month, but we do have a few different heads going. We have the cigar one, we have just the angry face one, and we have the yelling one. And so we will be doing a sale for those. There'll be a lot more information coming up, but that is coming. They are finally done. The sale is finally going to be happening. It will not fit onto this figure directly, the custom heads, but I'm sure somebody with a little bit of modification skills will be able to make it work since the scales are the same. Alright, if I can stop kicking the camera, let's move on to the review. It looks good for the most part, aesthetically speaking. It's a pretty solid figure, but here's the thing that bugs me about Mafex, and it's going to be the running thing throughout this whole review. They're expensive, and they have some stiff competition from Hasbro. In this case, Hasbro has what I believe to be the by far best Wolverine sculpt, and that's this one right here. It's a really well proportioned sculpt, and the paints are pretty decent. This one, it's lacking in a few places. We'll talk about those specifically, but first let's do a quick question of the day. Which version of Wolverine is your favorite? For me, it's got to be the 90s cartoon Jim Lee style tiger stripe Wolverine. Okay, so paint job on this guy. We'll start with paint. The yellow, it's too lemony. It's not the right yellow. Even if we look at the package, it should be much more of an orangey yellow, like a number 2 pencil yellow. In my experience, that's what the brown suit Wolverine always had, and I guess I could be wrong, but even according to their own packaging, it's supposed to be that kind of yellow. If you want to compare it to the brown suit Wolverine, which is the weakest of the Wolverines from Hasbro, the yellowish orange tannish color is significantly better on the Hasbro one. This one is much closer to this version, in fact, which is the lemoniest yellow that we have seen from Hasbro. So that's not a great thing. It does have a little bit of that orangey color shaded throughout. It's well done, but it's very subtle. It's just not enough. So if that's going to bother you, you should be aware of that. It's not the darker tannish orangish yellow. It's a very bright yellow. So that could be an issue for some people. The brown is done nicely. I think there's a little bit of shading on it, but it's very subtle. I think there's some in the chest, maybe in the outer chest areas. It's hard to say. I think it's there, but it's super subtle and I don't see it anywhere else. Yeah, not so sure about that. Now the arms, it's all painted and they're nicely painted. Sort of. There is a little bit of shading going on the sides and on the tops on the forearms. The hair is speckly because it's done with like a dot matrix type tampography. So that doesn't look great. There is no sculpted texture to the arms like we see from Hasbro on that sculpt. And as you can see, Hasbro sculpt is just leagues better in terms of detail, not even counting the hair. The anatomy is way more defined on the Hasbro sculpt, which is not usually the case, but in this case, their Wolverine sculpt is phenomenal. And this Mafex one is very soft. There's not a whole lot of detail going on, and that's their style. That's fine, but these are things you guys will want to consider when you're buying your figure. Anyway, back to the paint. There is shading throughout. The arm hair is painted. It's okay. The face is painted in the same way, which is weird because there's not a whole lot going on there, but it is a dot matrix. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell. Maybe you can. For the eyes and the mouth, So if you get real close, it's going to matter to you. If you don't, it's not going to matter. But that's something to consider for those of you who are into photography. The last thing I'll talk about is like the line work, the edging. It's not bad. If you look at the chest, it's pretty clean. Down here where the yellow turns into flesh tone, definitely could be better, but it's okay. Same thing for up here on the shoulders where the brown turns to flesh tone. It's pretty sloppy in some places. That would be fine on a Hasbro figure, but on this figure, which is 5 times as much, if not a lot more than that. What was it, 100? I think it was about $100. So that's not a great situation with the paint. Down here on the boots, it's pretty clean. So there's that. Okay, so that's the paint covered. Let's talk about the sculpt. We already did a little bit. It is fairly soft. Like I said, it's their style. They can do that if they want to, but it's definitely not a realistic sculpt by any means. The muscle groups are very poorly defined. If you're looking for like a really heavy superhero, like I said, look at the arms. Just compare the arms again. The sculpt on this guy is just nuts for the Hasbro one, and on this one he looks very slender, very slim, not too much definition. The legs are done pretty well, but again, there's not much definition. It's like they got the muscle groups there, but didn't try to make it look realistic at all. So it's fine. It's just something you need to be aware of. The claws on this guy are much shorter, and they are the curved version, which I understand is an acceptable thing. I'm personally a fan of the straight claws on Wolverine, not the long, goofy ones from the old release, but not these either. These are fine though, I'll take them, but I've just never been a fan of the curved ones since it doesn't make sense, since they have to go into his forearm. But this is comic accurate to some source material, and they do look fantastic with that silver paint, so they do look good enough, and they're not ridiculously long and goofy looking, so that's fine. Head sculpt is fine, no issues there. I don't have mine anymore to compare. I want to say it's the same head sculpt as before. I'm pretty sure it is, which I think is more appropriate for the Tiger Stripe Wolverine. For this outfit, I would have preferred one with the smaller ears, but again, this can be an accurate thing, so that's going to be fine, but something you should be aware of. And I think that pretty much covers it. Proportions, it's a lot more of a slender Wolverine, but it's fine. There's nothing wrong with the proportioning. Looks good to me. I'm happy with it. He doesn't look like a smaller scale figure. He does look like a shorter guy, which is how it should be. Hasbro did a really good job of that with their particular style of blocky type sculpting. It looks perfect for Wolverine, but this one does too, just a slightly different style. And you're probably wondering, why do I keep comparing to Hasbro? If it's not clear, it's because it's 5 times less money. Now, unfortunately for this, or fortunately for this guy, their brown suit Wolverine is one of the worst ones because of the different anatomy, but it's still a $20 figure as opposed to $100, so that's why I'm making the comparison. This does look good though, so aesthetically speaking, despite the few flaws here and there and a little bit of issues, it's going to get an 8 out of 10. It's a strong looking figure, it looks good, but for the price, those flaws shouldn't be there. All right, now for accessories, we have an alternate head with kind of like a smirky face, so that's pretty cool. We have the unmasked head, which is not something I'm a fan of at all. It's not terrible looking, but I don't like the way it's painted. I'm not a fan of the sculpt, the way the hair sticks out just above the ears and not the back of the head. To me, that looks super weird, and I'm not a fan of it at all. It's well enough done, I guess, if you're okay with how it looks, but to me, it's not accurate, and it doesn't look good, and I don't care for it, but that's up to you. To go with that head, we also do get the down cowl, which does not look as good as the one Hasbro made. Sculpt-wise, paint-wise, it's pretty okay. We have some alternate hands, so obviously we have the claw hands, but then we do get a set of fist hands with no claws and some style pose hands with no claws. That is it, aside from a display stand, which definitely needs to be tightened out of the package. Mine was very loose. But that's it for accessories, so that's not a ton. And again, this guy comes in at a pretty high price point, so generous 7 out of 10. I like that it comes with a display stand, but those don't cost much. And since this is mostly a repaint, I'm feeling like we should have gotten some more accessories with this guy. Something. So yeah, again, price point kills things that aren't really hitting on all cylinders, firing on all cylinders. Okay, let's talk about the articulation. Let's see if this guy falls apart at all. It is a double ball peg for the top of the head and a single one for the neck, so the head moves around nicely. It's a curved one for the top, so it can be a little finicky in some situations, but you should be fine. You should be able to move his head around however you want with no issues. The shoulders are on a ball peg on the inside, ball hinge on the outside. There is a little bit of a wobble to it to get it to go in farther or out farther. It's mostly an aesthetic thing. You're not going to get too much functionality out of that slight extension, if you want to call it that. This is just a floating cap, so it'll just move around as you move the arm around. Should be fine. Joints all feel good. You do get the full raise onto the side. That's nice. Oh, that's another thing. The shoulders on this guy, the way they did the bean shape, you can see the armpit has like a a butt crack in there. It's not the best way to do it, and they have so much extra room. If they had filled out those shoulders a little bit, made the shoulders a little bit bigger, the sculpt would have looked much nicer. Big shoulders are necessary, and Hasbro nailed it with this sculpt. How much bigger that shoulder is in the tricep area. Yeah, that looks good. Anyway, this one's okay sculpt-wise, but it's not particularly good. But you do get good range going out to the side. And by the way, the range is good here, but not because of that. It could have been good either way. There's so much extra clearance in there that it wouldn't have mattered. But you do get your full rotation. That's all fine. Bicep swivel doesn't seem to be falling apart on this one, so that's good. I've tugged on it a little bit. That's what she said. It's fine, though. I haven't had any problems, and I guess that's better. I mean, it's definitely better than the last release. Arms have really good range. There is shading on the elbow too. I didn't mention that, but there is some. Yeah, good range there. It looks good. I like the way they do their elbows. Ball hinge for the wrist. Gives you plenty of range. It's a good sized ball hinge. It's not super ugly. Yeah, obviously you get some gapping, but this is how you do a ball hinge wrist. That's nice. I like it. Could it have been a bigger ball hinge? Sure, but this will do. This will be just fine. The wrists are supposed to pinch in anyway. For the torso, it's a lot stiffer than I remember the last one being, but I could just be remembering wrong. But that's as far forward as it goes on that top ball peg. On that back ball peg, that's as far back as it goes, so it is quite a bit more limited. There's not a lot to do there, but it's enough to get some posing done. And then side to side, that's not bad. It's not bad. It is very, very stiff, but it does work. And then you do get your rotation. Be careful though, this guy is painted, I want to say almost entirely. This is molded in yellow, but I'm pretty sure there's still yellow paint on top in addition to the shading. So just be careful you don't grind the two pieces together, but you get your rotation there. Out of the lower torso, we get another lean on that ball peg. So altogether, it goes pretty far back. I think that's fine. But again, fine, is it enough? That's the question for this price point, for 100 bucks. I'm not sure. It doesn't lean forward all that far at the lower torso. And then side to side, just a tiny bit, and then a little bit of rotation. Again, that one's very stiff. The belt is floating, so that's a good thing. For the hips, we have hinged ball pegs. So they go up and down. When they're down, they don't look good. And I wish companies would stop doing this design because it's just not a good design. They almost never add functionality. Yeah, as you bring the leg up, you slide the hinge up anyway, so there's no point. But he does do pretty good splits. That's fine. And the joint isn't too loose that it's irritating, but it's not a problem. The legs do tend to pop down when you don't want them to. Going forward, it's not great. It's not great. It goes out to the side a little bit, and they do go all the way up, but then you get a big gap because of that hinged ball peg. It just doesn't need to be there. You don't need that at all, and they can work just fine. You do get a thigh swivel out of it a little bit. The knees definitely could look better, but if you finagle them just right, you don't get too much of a gap. If you do it wrong, you get a huge gap. Just don't do that. Use both joints appropriately, and it fills the gaps nicely, and it works really well. Very good knees. Their knees and elbows are really, really nice. For the ankles, it's a big ball hinge, which is how you want to do it for an ankle. You get good range forward and back, proper ankle rocker. No complaints out of that. That is exactly how they should have done that. Toe hinge is pretty much worthless, but it's not a bad one as far as toe hinges go. It's a little floppy, and it's not going to really be good for anything, but it's there, and they did a decent enough job. So the articulation on this guy seems to be pretty effective. I don't really have any problems with any of it, and it does work pretty well in some cases. Yeah, I guess for the price point, it's about average, but it's good. So, average good, I should say. I'll give it a 7. 7 out of 10 for the articulation. We could get a lot more range out of here. These definitely shouldn't be the way they are, but they're not bad. And so, yeah, 7 out of 10. I'm much happier with this figure than I was the previous Wolverine. I'm going to keep this one. I got rid of the other one as fast as I could. This one I'm happy with, as a collector and as a reviewer. So now it's time for the final verdict. Should you get this? Well, that depends. Do you have $100 burning a hole in your pocket and don't like this Hasbro version of the brown suit Wolverine? Then yes, you should definitely get it because it's definitely better than that Hasbro version. If you are happy with any of the other versions from Hasbro, I don't know if this warrants a $100 price tag. It's a good Wolverine figure. Is it $100 good? I don't know. That's going to be up to you. But I'm going to say, final verdict, as objective as I can make it, 8 out of 10. It's a good figure overall. There are definitely things I would change. If you're okay with the price point, I'd say get it. If you're not, then it's easy to justify not buying this thing because for $100 we shouldn't have some of those problems for sure. But as far as Mafex figures go, this is one of their better releases, I would say, not counting some of the Spider-Mans, which are really good, but it's good. It's definitely better than the last Wolverine. I personally really enjoy it. But those problems do bug me. So there it is, guys. Let me know what you think about the figure in the comment section below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And if you haven't subscribed, you might want to. I have new videos almost every single day and thousands already on the channel. So make sure you come back for all of that. In the meantime, keep collecting.